Hello, beautiful soul sister, and welcome back to another episode of the Soul Powered Podcast. I'm your host, Rebekah Kiger. I'm a trauma-informed master mindset and money coach, as well as a financial expert of over 17 years. I have spent my entire adult life studying the difference between successful and unsuccessful people, and I plan on sharing all of the things with you on this journey together. This podcast is called the Soul Powered Podcast because it's my desire to share with you how to create a life that is powered by your soul, not by societal standards or what everyone else in your life tells you that you should be doing, but actually powered by your soul. The reason you'd want to do this is because I believe that this is the fastest way to unlock your portal to prosperity and become what I call the wildly wealthy woman. This is the portal that once you enter it, you gain access to the prosperity, abundance, wealth, time freedom, experiences, fulfillment that are your birthright. I don't believe that you came here to build someone else's dreams. I believe you came here to live your soul-powered life and live it to the fullest. And I plan on sharing with you exactly how to do that during our time together. So thank you so much for being here. I know we're going to have so much fun together today. Let's dive in. Hello, my love, and welcome back to another episode of the Soul Powered Podcast. I'm your host, Rebekah Kiger. I am a master mindset and money coach with over 18 years experience helping people reach their financial goals. And I'm so excited to continue this series on how to break through your current financial plateau. Now we are on part 2. I was going to say section 2. I don't know why. And last week I was drinking energy drinks, which are not something that I drink very often. I was drinking a little, probably like a half of one. You guys, I'm a lightweight. Like if I drink even like a little bit of caffeine, or even there was one time when we went to the mall and there was a wine place and I was like testing wines. Is anyone else like this or is it just me? And those little tiny cups of like literally like a taste test of wine, I probably had like 2 or 3. And like, I needed Eric to drive home. Like, that's how ridiculous it is. Like, am I the only one? So today I'm drinking my regular Zevias, but I digress. So let's dive in because last week I was a little bit like hyper and today I am back to my normal self. So we are going to talk about the part 2 of how to break through your current financial plateau and what some of the things are that may be holding you back from actually reaching that next level. These are all things that I've done as well as done with my clients. So if you're watching me on video, which we're doing video podcast now, I will be looking down to make sure that I don't miss anything on my notes. Okay. So when we're talking about releasing the things that are in the way of you being able to reach your financial goals, today's conversation is really going to be one of the most important. I know like they're all important, they're all important, but this one is really important, especially if you're holding on to a lot of shame or guilt, or you're blaming yourself, or you feel like you're bad with money, or you've made a lot of bad financial decisions in the past, right? And a lot of times, like I see this a lot where people just tell me, I'm just not good with money. And it's like, well, when did you decide that? Because no one is just born out of their mother's womb, like ready to budget and create spreadsheets and like go out and make millions of dollars. Like it doesn't work that way. So when did you decide that you're not good with money? Likely what happened is through the years of literally making decisions after decisions after decisions, right? Of maybe not being taught the proper way to handle finances or to do things, you picked up on, oh, I've made decisions that I thought were the right thing to do. And at the time, that was the information that you had at hand. You made the decision, then it didn't turn out to be the right thing to do. And now you're still holding on to that energy of, I'm not good enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm bad with money. I should be guilty. I should be shameful. I'm not someone that can manage things in a, significant way. And the problem with that thinking is that thinking from the past, you are literally bringing into your financial decisions that you're making right now and in the future. And I know a lot of times we don't realize that we're doing that, but we are. And until you actually release the energy that is potentially stuck within the body, because remember, the body keeps the score, right? The body remembers. The body holds on to these imprints of, the nervous system has imprints of, oh, I'm not good at making big financial decisions. And so it's going to try to prevent you from maybe taking calculated risks that are actually going to lead you to the next place in your business, or lead you to the next level, or investing in yourself, or investing in help, investing in someone that can support you, because it doesn't feel safe to take those financial risks. And so if you keep holding on to that energy of, I'm not good with money and I should be shamed or guilty, or I should blame myself for being where I'm at right now, can you see how what you focus on grows and what you track expands? And so the more that you're focused on this ideation of who it is that you believe that you are now, that you decided somewhere along the way because somebody didn't teach you something. Like, think about that for a second. You didn't learn how to do something, so you're now a bad person. It's like, it doesn't make sense, but this is what our nervous system and our unconscious mind does. It like creates these ridiculous stories. It's like, if I tried to, let's say that you never drove a car before. Like my daughter, right? My daughter was learning how to drive a car when she was 16, 2 years ago. I was teaching her. Do you think for one second that I said to her, you just should know how to do this? What's wrong with you? You're 16. You should know how. You're 16. Other 16-year-olds know how to do this. What kind of mother would I be if I sat there and said, you should just know how to do this with no one ever showing you? Do you get my point? But this is what we do. It's like, I should know how to do this by now. I should have already figured this out. I should be further along. I should. And what we end up doing is we end up shooting all over ourselves. It's not a good place to be. It's not some place that, I gotta stop drinking these Zevias, because anyone who drinks these, they are so good, by the way. Love them, but maybe on a podcast is probably not the best time to drink them because it's distracting to have to potentially belch every single time I'm drinking one of these. Okay. So my point with all of this is that it is incredibly important to release the energy from the past so that you're not bringing forth all of this baggage into the future. If you didn't know how to do something before because no one freaking taught you, then you're not bad or wrong or an idiot or stupid or you should know this by now. No, you can just take what you're learning and apply it now. There are people who never learn this. I think that this is something that we all struggle with, including myself, where I look at, there's like 8-year-olds who are on YouTube making millions of dollars, right? And I feel old sometimes, right? It's so interesting. There's this phenomenon, and let me know if you resonate with this, that we go from, like, I felt like I was too young for the longest time. I was so young. I was a very young individual in my profession, and I was a young woman at that. I started in the banking industry when I was 18 years old, and I got my first license like shortly thereafter to start selling life insurance and annuities and things like that. And so when I was recommending things to people, it was based on my learned experience. And I was very young. I was like advising people what to do with their money at a very, very young age. But it's because I was put into this incredible position. But I used to think I was too young. And people probably, said that. I mean, at some point, I'm sure that someone said, oh, wow, you're really young to be doing this. And I was. But I was good at what I did. And I did a great job. But my point with that is, I used to tell myself the story, I'm too young. I'm too young. No one's going to take me seriously. I'm too young. And then one day it switched, like literally out of nowhere. I used to think I was so young. And then out of nowhere, probably when I hit like 35, it switched and I was like, holy shit, am I old? Like I'm too old to be doing this. It's like, what the hell? Right? We literally just create these ridiculous stories based on societal norms because I started seeing, holy shit, there's all these people who are, coming out of the woodwork and like they're 8 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, and they're making millions of dollars online, or they're, whatever, influencers, all this stuff who are way younger than me. And it's just important to know that this was my journey. It took me all of this time to be able to be where I'm at right now. I wouldn't have been able to serve people in the way that I can serve people now when I was 18 years old. when I was 12 years old, when I was 8 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in survival mode. I was literally in survival mode for the majority of my life. For the first 30 years of my life, I was in survival mode. So how am I going to serve someone else when I couldn't even help myself? Does that make sense? And so I think that it's really important to recognize that we are always going to find reasons why we should be doing something different or why we're not far along enough. There's always going to be someone who's doing it better. But one of the best books that I've read recently is called The Gap and Gain. As a matter of fact, I listened to it, but I should re-listen to it because I like to embed that stuff into my subconscious mind. But the point of the book is basically it's called The Gap and the Gain. Okay. And the author talks about how so many of us are measuring our lives against an ideal. And so we're saying things like, well, I should be further along because like the ideal situation is to be here. So if your goal is to be at $100,000 a year and you're making $75,000 a year, if you're measuring yourself against that ideal, there's always going to be a gap. There's always going to be a gap. And we as high achieving women, we tend to move that gap. We tend to move that goalpost, right? Like it's like we'll hit the 100,000 and then, okay, well, I'm not actually happy. It didn't change anything internally for me. And so maybe 200,000 will, maybe 300,000 will, maybe it's 1 million that will. And I've seen women, people in general, but mostly women that I work with who have just continued on this cycle. And it's literally like, I did this for sure. And every single milestone I would hit, it was like I celebrate for a very short period of time. And then I was on to the next goal. So in this concept of the gap and the gain, it's measuring backwards, always measuring backwards. Like, look how far you have come. Are you kidding me? Yes, you maybe have made financial mistakes. No, maybe you don't know how to do every single thing that you need to know how to do. I don't know how to do everything that I need to do. It's a learning process. I wasn't taught any of this stuff. And so I have just now been able to release so much of that shame and guilt and pain and just anger and frustration that I had with myself about like, you should know this. How? No one taught me. Like we were in survival mode. I didn't learn how to be an adult. I didn't, because the people that I was learning from were wounded in their own ways and they were also in survival mode. So the only thing that they were ever worried about was surviving, keeping me alive. So I didn't learn some of the basic things realistically that most people do. And if you don't come from, a broken home or come from poverty, it might be hard to understand. There are people who, sorry, my hair is a little bit messed up here. Just forget it, okay? Just forget it. We look a little crazy today, but that's all right. I need to wash my hair. So my point with all this is that if you weren't taught how to do certain things, how would you possibly know? And coming from broken homes, coming from poverty, coming from the area that I came from, and the just financial literacy of the people who were around me when I was growing up, it just wasn't there. It just didn't exist. The life that I live now is so far beyond that. But it's hard, I think, for some people to grasp because when you weren't actually in that level of survival. And so wherever this applies to you, let it resonate. Take what resonates and leave what doesn't, because not every single person grew up the exact same way that I do. But I just want to offer that just because you don't know how to do something right now doesn't mean that you're wrong or that you did something 5 years ago, and you're still holding on to the guilt and shame. So all of this to say that tip number 2, okay, for breaking through your current financial plateau is you don't have to do anything, I guess, but I invite you to forgive yourself for past financial mistakes. This may seem very simple and you might have the tendency to like want to scroll off of here or, go to another episode, go to something else. But I promise you that if you are carrying baggage and stuck energy from the past into your present, you don't have the same level of room to bring anything new in. It's like if you were to order living room furniture, would you just bring in the living room furniture and place it on top of the old furniture? Okay, now we have 2 couches. Like you wouldn't do that. You would take out the old couch, throw it away, and make room for the new that's coming in. And it's the very same thing with releasing the stuck energy from the past. Now, there's many different layers to this. There's going to be a ton of different release work that I do with my clients inside of the Aligned Money program because it's really a multi-layered approach. It's a multifaceted approach. You have blocks and limiting beliefs and nervous system protective patterns and all of the things. But today, for the topic of our conversation, we're going to be talking about forgiving yourself for past financial mistakes because this is one of the simplest ways to make room for what you want to call in. Okay, so last week we talked about tip number one was doing a money date. If you have not listened to that episode, go back and listen to that because we talk about the importance of the money date process and why it's important to make sure that your nervous system feels safe around money. And a money date is a really good way to do that. But today we're going to talk about the importance of forgiving yourself for past financial mistakes. And we all have done them. Like we've all made mistakes. You making mistakes doesn't make you wrong or bad or an idiot or terrible with money. You making mistakes makes you human. And first and foremost, I really just want you to receive that for a second because I know it seems like really simple, but simple doesn't always simple is something where people will negate it and be like, that's really stupid. Like, I know I've heard that a million times before, but if you're not actually embodying it and you're not actually doing it, then you actually know it on a deep level. So just invite yourself to understand that and to just receive that for a moment. Like making mistakes makes you human, not bad, wrong, or anything else that your ego is creating stories around. And I know as a recovering perfectionist that I believed for a long time that making mistakes was quite literally, it did mean that I was bad. It did mean that I was wrong. It did mean that I was stupid. It did mean that I was an idiot. And so I was so afraid to take action. I was so afraid to take risks. I've been so afraid to do those things for such a long time because I was afraid of walking in the wrong direction or making a mistake because of how I was conditioned in my childhood. And, I walked on eggshells a lot and thinking that like my way of doing things was wrong. So no wonder, I would hold on to a lot of shame and guilt from past financial mistakes. And some of those mistakes that I've had to forgive myself from, which I just invite you to listen for where you can start to offer some compassion and grace in your own life. And maybe you have these very same tendencies, or you have in the past, and it's time for you to start to forgive. Maybe you have them now. It doesn't freaking matter. The point with this is, even if you are doing all the things that I'm about to mention right now in your life, that doesn't mean that you have to keep doing them. It's like, right? The way that you are programmed right now is based on your past. And where you're going in the future is going to be based on what you decide today. So just decide to allow yourself some compassion with this process and allow yourself to see this through the gentle observer lens, where the gentle observer is like, I'm just going to be very gentle and become aware of the way that I'm showing up in my life that is perpetuating these financial cycles that I don't want to continue anymore. That's that. It's that simple. We all make mistakes. We're all programmed. We all live in this human experience to learn lessons. And that's part of how we have to do it is through mistakes. How could you possibly learn without making mistakes? How could you possibly learn without making mistakes? Okay. So just be with the fact that you're human, you're allowed to make mistakes, and it's time to forgive yourself for those mistakes. All right. So some of the things that I used to do as it relates to money, I mean, there's a whole bunch, but I'm just going to go over a few, is overspending. Okay. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so when I first started making more money, I kind of got out of survival mode on the 3D level, meaning like my income was outweighing my expenses. This was early on in probably my 20s. I would spend almost every dime that would come in because what I didn't realize back then, which I know now, is that my nervous system didn't feel safe actually holding on to the money because the baseline for my nervous system was chaos and stress and scarcity around money. I always was fearful, literally always. I put so much attention and so much energy towards money that it was just like all consuming. I mean, it consumed a lot of my thoughts on a daily basis. It consumed a lot because I was so afraid of not having it because then I wouldn't be able to, pay my bills or provide for my daughter, that my nervous system equated that to money is dangerous. Money is not only not safe, but it's actually dangerous because every time you think of money, you're freaking out. Every time you think of money, you're in this protective pattern. Every time you think of money, it's not a good sensation in the body. And so that must mean that money is dangerous because why would you continue to move towards something that is dangerous? And my nervous system was like, okay, we got to get rid of it. We have more than enough money. We got to get rid of it. And this would actually be like a physical urge and sensation. If I'd have more money in my bank account, I would feel this urge to like, oh, I got to get rid of it. And I wouldn't say like, I've got to get rid of it, but I would say things like, oh, I got to go and spend this money while I still have it. What that's doing is presupposing that there's not going to be money next month. And so the universe is like, okay, you don't want money next month? Cool. Like, I won't send you any. So, or, I'll send you just the same, and then you can just keep repeating this very same financial cycle until you're ready to break it. So I could have had a lot more money saved than I did, but I spent a lot. And I spent a lot on like dumb stuff, you know, keeping up with the Joneses type of situation. I found a pair of sunglasses that Kim Kardashian had. It's like I had to have these sunglasses, I still like them, they're nice, but like it's just why, they were $1,000 pair of sunglasses. Caveat with that, I had a friend who was working at it was a glasses place, and so I didn't have to pay that much for them. But my point is that why did I need $1,000 pair of sunglasses when I didn't even own a home at the time? You see what I mean? Like it's like my priorities weren't where they needed to be. But I forgave myself for that because if I sat there and held on to the guilt and the shame about all the money that I did spend, I recognize now that the lesson is way more valuable to me than any amount of money that I could have saved during that period of time. Luckily, I did something called pay myself first, which you may have heard that phrase before, and if you're not doing this, it's a really good thing to do. But basically, I had my investments and my retirement money coming out of my pay or coming out of my accounts before I spent whatever was left. So it's kind of like I did pay myself first. So I had investments and things that were accumulating and growing. Thankfully, I did that because otherwise I would have been like, once I realized all of this, I would have been 30 and broke with no savings. So it's okay. It's an opportunity for you to, if you are overspending or you're seeing yourself like getting anxious because you have more money than you need to, or the contrary to that would be I moved to the other side of that, where once I started saving, money became my source of safety. And so I wouldn't want to spend. It's like I went from overspending, the mindless spender, as we call it, to like the anxious saver, which is where I would go the opposite end of the spectrum. That was another mistake that I would make, which was I just thought that money once I started saving it and I realized, oh, wow, life is so much better here. And this is probably like my late 20s at that point. Life is so much better on this side of having more than enough and always having an abundance and always having overflow. So then I went like, and I got real stingy. I got really stingy around money. And I would be like, I don't want to spend that $50. Like, that's way too much to spend. Or, my siblings and I would get into fights and things because I I was just so much in survival mode that I never wanted to go back to the place of like having to worry about where my daughter's next meal was coming from. So then I went to the opposite side of the spectrum and I started to get really anxious and not spend and I would fight. I would fight with my siblings. I'm like, I'm not paying for that. I'm not, and they would want to go out and like do things together. And I just wouldn't want to do it because I don't want to spend the money, even though I had it. So again, and there's reasons for all of this. There's nervous system dysregulation around this that came through, and part of that is based on my disorganized attachment style, which is what I call the fearful on the fencer. So I'm actually working on a quiz right now, and I believe, did I record podcast episodes about this? I don't think I did yet. So if I didn't, I will. Oh, that's a good one to do. To talk about the different archetypes, the money archetypes, because realistically, you may be showing up in a way that you didn't necessarily realize, and it's actually holding you back, right? From based on your attachment style. So we'll talk about that in a future episode. But my point in bringing all of this up is I had to release the shame and the guilt around all of those behaviors that I had for so long. The point was my nervous system did not feel safe. It didn't feel safe with money and it didn't feel safe without it. Definitely not without it, right? So I want to caveat, because this is an important thing to understand, is that more money is not going to heal your nervous system around it. More money is not going to heal your relationship to it. More money is not going to make you feel safe. And you might have to figure that out the hard way, like I did. You may have to go through it and then realize, and that's okay too. But first and foremost, what you need to do is really understand that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to forgive yourself for those mistakes. And so, no matter what it is that you've done, I have made shady investments in the past. I've trusted people that I shouldn't have. I've lent out money more times than I even want to admit that I freaking knew wasn't coming back to me. And yet, then I would sit there and think, oh, this person, I would stress myself out about the fact that, well, this person owes me all this money, but they're going out and doing this and they're traveling. It's just not a way to be. And I literally just didn't know any better. And I was people pleasing, like the disorganization, the disorganized attachment style that I had from my childhood. It was real and it showed up in a lot of different ways. It showed up in me doing things that I would not choose to do today. But one of the things that I think is really important to note is if you are blaming, shaming, guilting yourself for something that you have done in the past that you would not choose to do today, you are quite literally convicting an innocent person. I'm going to say that again because I really want you to hear this. This is very important. If you are blaming and shaming yourself for something that you did in the past that you would not do today, then you are convicting an innocent person over and over again. And that innocent person, that person that's sitting here today, is being guilted and shamed and not trusted because of something that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, last year, 6 months ago. It doesn't matter if it was yesterday. You are not the same person today as you were even yesterday. You're not. You're not. From a quantum perspective and a 3D perspective, we're not even going to get into it right now. Maybe that's for another episode. But you are not the same person that you were. You have new understandings, you have new awareness, you have new ways of thinking about things, you have new perspectives. And every time you shift that, you shift into a new reality. So you're not the same person that you were. So why are you blaming yourself for something you did 5 years ago? How is that helping you? Right? And maybe you've just never been taught how to not do that and how to create some compassion around that. So let's do that. Let's do that. If you have been able to think of some things that, which I'm sure that you have by now, I think we all have them. If you've been able to think of some things that you're not necessarily proud of with financial decisions that you've made in the past, whether you've lent someone a whole bunch of money and they never paid it back and you knew you shouldn't have done it, but you did, and you went against your gut and you did it anyways. And now you keep blaming yourself for that. If I'd have just had that money, if I would have just taken that job opportunity, if I would have just done this, if I would have just done that, everything would have been different. How the hell do you even know that? How do you know that that's true? I think about sometimes, like my dad, he hit the lottery probably, I don't know, 20 years ago now at this point. And he ended up being a statistic. He lost it all, like, actually was in worse position a couple years later than he was whenever he hit the lottery. And I used to say things like, "Man, wouldn't it be nice if I hit the lottery, I would know what to do with it." And I think at this point in my life, yes, that would be true. I don't play, so you have to play to win. But my point is that if I came into an unexpected large lump sum of money, I've been doing this long enough that I would know how to manage it. I've been dealing with big, big, big numbers for a very long time. So it doesn't really affect me. I have access to a significant amount of money on a daily basis. So it's not something that would throw me into overdrive now. But back then, hell yeah, it would have. Right? Hell yeah, it would have. And that's something that I see a lot of times is people who have made poor choices and poor decisions with inheritances or large lump sums of money or bonuses or lottery winnings and things like that. We all think that that would change our lives and that there's still a TV show called The Lottery Ruined My Life. So does it really change your life? Is it really that life changing? And is it actually going to make everything better, or do you need to become the type of person who can hold on to those things? And the way that we do that is through this series that we're talking about, doing money dates, right? Talked about them a lot in the last episode, where you're starting to get your nervous system on board with actually being able to feel safe around money and then forgiving yourself. And then whatever we're going to talk about in the next couple episodes, because this is a four-part series. But I really think that if you can start to let go of some of that energy from the past financial mistakes that you've had through bringing some acknowledgement and some compassion in with it, just understanding that you were not the same person. You weren't thinking from the same perspective. You weren't thinking from the same paradigm. I think about all the things I've forgiven myself for. And sometimes I'm like, what in the hell were you thinking? Were you thinking? Was your brain operating properly, babe? Like some of the guys I've dated, oh my God. I'm like, what did your brain, was it on? Was your brain on? Like, did it actually work? I don't know. I don't know how it did. But that's the point of growth, guys. Like, that's the best part of this whole thing is like we get to grow and evolve. And we also get to laugh at ourselves for making like, what the fuck were you doing? Let's be honest. Like, what were you doing? Who were you, what did you see in this person? Or why did you do that? Like, what were you thinking? But it's okay. It's okay to laugh at it, to poke fun at it now, because when we take the lesson from it, and I'm going to go into a guide to start the forgiveness. One of them, I'm getting ahead of myself, is the lesson. So number one, you want to start forgiving yourself is identify and acknowledge the mistake. Just acknowledge it and recognize that you're not the same person. So it's okay. Like maybe do some journaling and try to put yourself back into the paradigm and the vibration of that version of you. I do this often with inner child healing and past, but past healing with myself. And so I believe, I mean, technically you're not a child at 18, but yes, you are. Let's be real. I looked at I often look at, and recently I have looked at that version of myself when I was 18 because there were some things that I was working through, and just put myself back into her shoes and was like, you were so far gone at that age. Like you had been abandoned, rejected, you had been left to figure out life on your own by that point. Your family, most of them like disowned you at the time, and I love them and forgive them now, but that was the reality. There were so many heavy things. You had been abused pretty much in every way possible. Pretty much like, yeah, abused, and like I look at it like just left for like the world to eat me alive. And how would someone who has that reality be able to like navigate a narcissistic relationship at the time and an abusive relationship? How would I have known how to do that? How? So when I go to do this forgiveness work, I'm putting myself back in the perspective and the paradigm of that version of me, and I'm like, you wouldn't have known, man. You were in survival mode. Like you literally were just trying to like survive. And at that point in my life, my physical life was actually being threatened, like on a consistent basis. So it's not even just that my financial reality was threatened. My physical life was being threatened on a consistent basis from multiple different people who were supposed to love me and were supposed to care for me and provide for me. So I wouldn't have known how to do that. And there are periods of your life, periods of time in your life that you can look back and see and likely say something similar. We all have periods that we're not proud of, but if you look back and you realize, why was I making those decisions? What kind of energy was I in? Who was I around? Was anyone even helping me navigate these things? And if the answer is no, then how would you possibly know how to go from there? How would you have known what to do? You wouldn't. So identify and acknowledge the mistakes. And then I invite you to look for the lesson. Look for the lesson in the mistake. So you might be telling yourself a story right now. So in this case, I could be telling myself the story that I was so stupid. I was an idiot. I shouldn't have been doing that. I shouldn't have been dating this guy. I should have known better, blah, 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 which I did do for a very long time. I told myself that story. But then I started looking for the gifts and I started looking for the lessons and I started looking for the silver lining. And I started realizing that number one, I got my daughter from it, which I would have gone through hell and back. I would literally having that perfect freaking child who is like literally my absolute best friend in this world, who I grew up with, literally. I mean, she grew up with me. We grew up together and we have the most beautiful relationship. I tear up thinking about it because there was a period of time where that was not the case. And now we have such a beautiful relationship as I have healed. I've been able to model that healing for her. And she is my life's greatest gift beyond a shadow of a doubt. I would walk through hell and come back again and again if I had to get that gift into my life. So not only do I have lessons that I can take from that experience, but I got a child out of it. And I got the most wonderful human being that I could ever imagine as a child out of it. And I will never regret that. I will never regret a single decision that I made that led me there, ever. I will never do it because I got her out of it. And even if you don't have a child and you didn't receive a child out of the scenario, there are still beautiful lessons that you can take. And the other lessons that I was able to take in an effort to help you start to uncover some for yourself, I realized that that experience was to show me so much contrast about how certain people can treat you and how certain people don't even value themselves enough to be able to value you. And I can take that experience and compare it, measure backwards, always measure backwards, like the book says, to the experience that I have right now with my husband. And the amount of appreciation that I have for the man that my husband is out of this world. And a big part of that is because I saw all of the contrasts with the father of my child. I lived with him. I knew what it was like to be treated like shit and to be cheated on and mentally and physically abused. And I'm not a victim here. I'm not here to not saying any of this so that like there's pity here. This is just to give you a example of how contrast does create clarity. And sometimes when we're so lost within ourselves, we don't recognize how much we actually deserve. And that was really important for me to be able to see that, to see the contrast that this is how someone who doesn't love themselves will treat you. This is how someone who loves themselves and loves you more than anything will treat you. And so it really does allow for us to create and take away lessons. So even if you don't have a lesson right now, you can just kind of put your hand on your heart and take a moment, take a nice deep breath, and just ask, what did I gain from this? What was the lesson from this? What can I take from this? If there's any good from this scenario, what can I take from it? And some of this stuff is really freaking dark. Like, don't get me wrong. And I'm not suggesting that I had it worse than anyone because I know that that's not true. I know there's tons of people who have had it really, really bad in their life as well and have had some really big T trauma things happen to them. I know and understand big T trauma deeply. And there are things that happen to me as a child that should never happen to any child. And I can still look at those big T traumas and take something from them. I can still take something from them, mainly because I choose to allow those to be the things that are going to hold me down. I'm going to use those things as fuel because I could still live in those, and so can you. But this is part of even forgiving, forgiving yourself and forgiving others. But we'll stay on the topic of forgiving ourselves for now. Step 3 is to practice self-compassion and acceptance. Think about it like this. If someone that you knew came up to you and said, "Hey, I did this. I did this thing like a year ago, and I'm still holding on to all this guilt and all this shame. And I feel like such an idiot because I made this stupid decision and it could have led me here and I could have done this and blah, 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 all the things." How would you respond to that person that you love? If there's someone who came up to you who really like you love and you don't want them to feel badly, what would you say to them about their decision and about forgiving themselves for it? Maybe spend a little bit of time journaling on that. So if you're going to journal on this, allow that to, what would you say to that person? And then turn around and ask yourself, why wouldn't this just be true about me as well? I'm sure you would probably say to that friend of yours, "Hey, you didn't know any different back then. You didn't know what you were doing. No one told you that. It was a scam. It was a lie. It wasn't you were fooled because someone manipulated you or you made a poor decision because you didn't know any better." Like you would give that person so much compassion. So why aren't you giving yourself the same level of compassion? So when you're doing this journaling exercise, see if you can write it out to the other person and then maybe turn around and read it aloud to yourself and allow yourself to receive that beautiful compassion from you. Okay. And the last thing is to set new intentions, to really be able to let go of the things, forgiving yourself. And a really good practice for forgiveness, by the way, is a practice that I learned from Dr. Matt James, who is the NLP teacher that I learned from. I became a master practitioner through him of NLP, but also he is a Huna practitioner, which is an energy, essentially Hawaiian energy practice, ancient Hawaiian energy practices. And he teaches a process called Ho'oponopono, which is an ancient forgiveness practice. And he actually has a YouTube video that you can do this with. I think it's like 7 minutes or so. It's like a meditation where essentially you just go and you forgive other people and you can also forgive yourself. And I would invite you to just start looking into those kinds of exercises, whether you have to write yourself a letter, whether you need to, just in this journaling practice, just literally allow yourself to know that you're forgiven for this and that you're going to take these lessons with you and set new intentions for the future. So instead of taking with you all of the baggage and all of the energy, the stuck energy and the survival energy and the guilt and the shame from those things, what if you could let that go and just make a decision? I'm going to let this go and I'm going to bring with me the lessons instead. And so journaling on that so that you can let go of all of the things that are holding you back and then move into, all right, well, what do I want to do with this? Because you can use that and all of those situations or any situations that have come up in the past as a reason that you can't succeed, or you can use them as the reason that you will succeed. And to me, that's what I have taken all of the things almost to a fault. I work better when my back is against the wall. And that's something I'm currently working on right now. So I don't always want things to be tough and hard for me, but it's something that I've been unraveling because I will always use a negative and turn it into a positive. It's just something that is a part of me now. And so all of those things, I refuse to be the I refuse to allow those things to be the thing that keeps me down and holds me back. So I invite you to take a look at how you might be able to do the same with the different lessons that you can take away from these experiences. I'm never going to do that again, right? We can trust ourselves and start taking action towards that, maybe little baby steps. Maybe you don't fully trust yourself right now with financial decisions because you haven't been able to do so in the past because you've made some poor choices and you've been bringing this baggage with you in every financial decision that you've made since. But now you're learning this and you're learning how to let these things go. And so now you get to say, what if we practice? What if we practice trusting ourselves with maybe a small financial decision? And then start to build that trust with yourself again, where you're seeing, oh, okay, this is actually working out and I'm okay. I can invest in maybe this, low ticket offer, or I can take a step in the direction and I can invest in a coach and hire a coach, or I can, go on this vacation because I can trust myself that the money's going to come back, whatever it is. Okay. So setting those new intentions, taking those lessons with you, and actually deciding how you're going to apply those lessons so that you don't continue to make those same financial mistakes. All right. So that's all I had for you today. I really, really want to see what occurs for you in your life as a result of letting go of this and forgiving yourself and letting go of those past financial mistakes, because I know the vast opportunity that's available for you when you make room for it. And what you desire also desires you, but is there room? Is there room? Do you have space, or are you at your max capacity? Because the nervous system has a capacity for what it's willing to hold. And if all of that capacity is filled up with things that you don't actually want, then we don't have a lot of room, right? So part of healing your nervous system is expanding your capacity to receive, but we want to focus on receiving the good things that we actually want and not continuing to receive the shame and the blame and the criticism that we are giving ourselves, because it's taking up room where other things can come in its place that we actually want. So that's it for today. I hope that you found value in this conversation. If you have, please take a screenshot of this episode and tag me on Instagram at Rise with Rebekah. I'd love to hear your insights. Definitely helps me to help more people the more that we spread this message together. And I will chat with you in the next episode. We're going to go into part 3 of breaking through your current financial plateau. I hope to see you then, and I will chat with you soon. Bye. Soul Sister, thank you so much for tuning in to this entire episode today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you do me a favor and leave a quick review? This allows me to reach more people, and if you found value, I know others in your life will too. Also, be sure to share this episode on social media along with your biggest takeaways so I know what resonates most with you and I can keep the good stuff coming. And if you're looking to dive into a deeper connection than this podcast will allow, consider checking out my Rise to Riches experience in the show notes below. I would love to hear how these messages have helped you take one step closer to living your soul-powered life and becoming the wildly wealthy woman. Sis, let's continue to rise together. I'll see you next time. Bye.